The steering wheel jerked hard right without warning. No sound, no skid, just the sudden, violent pull of something that had been deliberately undone. Sloane Ashcroft had 1 second to register what was happening before the Range Rover left its lane and slammed into the moss-green Ford sitting on the shoulder of Route 9, in a stretch of Vermont where the nearest cell tower was 12 miles away, and the trees pressed so close to the road they blocked the afternoon light. She stepped out of the car before the dust had settled. The man leaning against the Ford straightened slowly. He was tall, somewhere in his early 40s, with the kind of hands that come from years of working with them. He wore a faded flannel shirt. His boots had seen more than one hard winter. He did not look alarmed. He looked at the damage to his truck the way a man looks at something he expected the world to do eventually. In his hand was an envelope. Cream paper, aged at the corners, and along one edge, 4 words written in a hand Sloane had known her entire life. For Sloane, when ready. Her father had been dead for 11 months. She opened her mouth, nothing came out. The man slid the envelope quietly into the inside pocket of his coat. He looked at her with eyes that were not unkind, but were not soft either. The eyes of a man who had been waiting for something for a very long time and was not yet sure it had arrived. "You'll want to call the police," he said. "I'll wait." The county officer arrived in 20 minutes. Lights off, no urgency. He knew the man by name and called him by it. "Eamon, you hurt?" "No, Tom, I'm fine." Sloane gave her information in the clipped, precise cadence of someone accustomed to managing situations from a position of authority. Mechanical failure. She would have the vehicle inspected. She would provide all necessary documentation by end of day. The officer nodded and wrote things down and did not push. When the tow truck said it would be an hour, Eamon suggested the coffee house up the road. She agreed without warmth. Inside the copper kettle, a woman with silver-streaked hair filled a ceramic mug without being asked and glanced at Eamon over the counter with a look that held an entire conversation. He gave a small shake of his head. She said nothing and moved away. Sloane looked at the man across the table. She placed him in a category she understood: small-town tradesman, likely fishing for a settlement, and she began to negotiate. He gave her numbers precise to the dollar: bumper replacement, repaint, transmission overhaul if the impact had jarred the casing. She paused at the precision. "What do you do for a living?" "I build furniture," he said, "nothing else." The bell above the door rang. A small girl in a denim jacket came in holding a folder of pressed maple leaves. She stopped when she saw the stranger at her father's table and tucked herself immediately behind his leg. "This is my daughter," Eamon said. He did not give her name. Sloane looked at the child briefly and looked away. Then she saw the envelope on the chair beside him. The cream paper, the corner with her father's handwriting facing up, 4 words she had already read from 10 feet away and could not stop reading. Before she could speak, Eamon picked up the envelope and slid it back into his coat pocket without hurry, without explanation. Like he had been expecting her to notice. The tow truck arrived. Sloane stood and placed her black business card on the table. "When you're ready to talk about that envelope," she said, keeping her voice even, "call me." Eamon looked at the card without picking it up. "I won't call," he said, "but if you come back, I'll be here." In the car to Burlington, she called her private counsel and asked them to send an independent inspector to the Range Rover, not the dealership, not any firm the company used, someone she had found herself and had never told anyone about. She drove back the next morning. The workshop sat at the end of a long gravel driveway off a bend in the road that most people would miss. Converted barn, low roof, sliding door. Inside, the air smelled of walnut oil and beeswax and something warm from the wood stove in the corner. The pieces on the floor stopped her at the threshold. A conference table for 12, edges mid-sand, Senate chamber chairs in white oak, a panel of marine decking laid out for a yacht refit, A clipboard by the door listed clients in pencil, a senator she recognized from a Boston fundraiser, two family names that had been in New England shipping for a century, a collector with a Tokyo address. This was not a man hiding from money. This was a man who had decided money was not the point. She turned to him. "Who are you?" Eamon set down his chisel. He wiped his hands. He took his time. "I was the man your father called on the night of March 14th, 2017, he said, the night before he died. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her. "I was a senior partner at Harrow and Whitlock," he continued. 12 years as your father's personal counsel. I left the practice 9 years ago after my wife died." She did not believe him. She pulled out her phone and searched the name. Eamon Whitlock, J.D. Harvard, partner at Harrow and Whitlock, 2014-2017, departed for personal reasons. The article had a photograph. He was younger, leaner, dark suit, but the eyes were identical to the ones looking at her now. She sat down on the white oak chair he had finished that morning. The silence stretched. "Your father left a letter," Eamon said. "He asked me to give it to you when you were ready, not when you came looking." "Then am I ready now?" He looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said. He laid the envelope on the workbench between them and did not push it forward. She stood furious. "Who decides that? You, a man I met yesterday in a ditch." "I decided," he said, "because you still walked in here thinking I want something from you." The line landed the way the truth lands when you aren't ready for it, without apology, without softening. She left the envelope on the bench. At the door she turned. "You should know the car yesterday didn't fail on its own. I have someone looking at it." Eamon's hand stopped halfway to the chisel. It was the first time since she had met him that something genuinely surprised him. "Then you'll need to be more careful than I thought," he said. After she was gone, he stood alone in the workshop with the envelope between his palms. He spoke to the empty room, half to himself, half to a name he had not said aloud in a long time. "She's too much like you, Howard." 200 miles south, in a Beacon Hill study, Brennan Holcroft set down a glass of whiskey and listened to a voice on his phone that he did not save under any name. She had been to Linden Hollow. She had met Whitlock. She was already asking about the car. Brennan asked if the inspection report had been intercepted. "Not yet," the voice said. Sloane took a room at the only inn in town, 4 rooms and a view of the river. She called Brennan from the rocking chair by the window. She told him only that she had met Eamon Whitlock. She did not mention the inspection. Brennan answered too smoothly. Whitlock had been her father's counsel, probably angling for a settlement. He would send a legal team in the morning. No need to engage further. She said she would think about it. Then, almost as an afterthought, his voice casual in the way it got when he was nervous, he said, "And the car, anything back from the inspection?" She held the phone away from her ear. She had not told Brennan about the inspection. She had not told anyone connected to the company. "Still waiting," she said. She ended the call. She sat for a long moment with the dark screen in her hand. Then she opened her father's old photo library on the tablet she kept in her bag. She scrolled until she found a picture from 2016, her father in a hard hat, Eamon beside him in shirt sleeves, and between them, a slim brown-haired woman in a charcoal blazer, smiling at something off frame. Behind them, a half-poured foundation, a banner, Ashcroft Valaris Project. She did not remember that project. She called her assistant in Boston and asked for the file. The reply came 20 minutes later. "No record. The project may have been wound down before completion." In the morning, she walked to the copper kettle. The woman behind the counter, Marjorie, according to the small painted sign by the register, poured her mint tea without asking. "You didn't sleep," Marjorie said, not a question. Sloane was caught off guard by the bluntness. She took the tea. Marjorie leaned on the counter. She had been a friend of Eamon's wife, she said, Cora, an architect. She had died 9 years ago in a scaffolding collapse at a job site outside Springfield. Eamon had brought his daughter to Linden Hollow a few months after the funeral. He had not built furniture before that. Sloane's hands went cold around the mug. Valaris Construction, she knew that name. A subcontractor her father's company had absorbed and then quietly dissolved in 2017. She walked to the workshop. Nora was cross-legged in the wood shavings, drawing a fox in pencil. Sloane lowered her voice. Your wife died on my father's project, didn't she? Eamon set down his screwdriver. That's part of what's in the envelope, he said, but it's not the most important part. Nora looked up and held out the drawing. Do you want it? It looks a little like you. She said it the way children say things, not as flattery, as a fact she had decided. Sloane took the paper between her fingertips. It had been a very long time since anyone had given her something for no reason at all. Before she left, she handed Eamon a folded sheet, the preliminary report from her counsel. The power steering fluid had been drained. The brake line had been loosened by hand. Both done deliberately. Eamon read it without expression. His hand closed around the page hard enough to crease it. You're not safe at the inn, he said. Tonight you stay here, upstairs, the room next to Nora's. She started to refuse. Then she looked out the window at the trees, the light already failing in them, the road empty and long and very far from anywhere. She nodded. If this story is keeping you in your seat right now, hit that like button. It tells us to keep making these. Now stay with us, because what happens next changes everything. Brennan Holcroft arrived in Linden Hollow the next morning without warning. Black Audi, Massachusetts plates, parked in front of the inn like he expected the building to greet him. The room was empty. She had checked out before 6. He called her from the parking lot. She answered from the workshop, watching Eamon teach Nora how to hold a sanding block properly. She stepped outside into the cold air before she spoke. Brennan proposed a meeting, the 3 of them, get whatever claim Whitlock had on the table and settle it cleanly. She agreed. She named the place and time, the Copper Kettle, after hours. When she hung up, Eamon was already off the phone with Marjorie. A black Audi had driven past the coffee house twice, tinted windows, Massachusetts plates. His face changed in a way she had not seen yet, not alarmed, something older and colder than alarm. He took Nora next door to a retired teacher named Iris, who had a cottage full of houseplants and a kettle always on. On the walk back, Nora looked up at her father. Is she coming back, the Ashcroft lady? I think so, he said. Nora nodded, satisfied, and went inside. The meeting began at 8. Marjorie locked the front door and stayed behind the counter polishing glasses she had already polished. Brennan did not bother with small talk. Whitlock, whatever documents you're holding for Howard Ashcroft, you turn them over to his daughter tonight. Confidentiality terminates at the client's death. Eamon did not raise his voice. You know that isn't correct. Fiduciary duty extends to the testator's stated intent. You also know exactly why Howard didn't leave these documents with you. A flush climbed into Brennan's neck. Eamon continued, I'll deliver the envelope to Sloane when she asks for it, not when you ask on her behalf. Sloane turned in her chair toward Brennan. Her voice was flat. Yesterday on the phone, you asked about the car inspection. I don't remember telling you there was an inspection. How did you know? 2 seconds of silence, long ones. Then he smiled just at the corners. You mentioned it earlier in the call. You don't remember. She did not smile back. Brennan rose. He buttoned his coat with the slow precision of a man accustomed to being watched. Whitlock, you've been out of the law 9 years. Don't assume there's anyone left to protect you. For the first time in the entire meeting, something moved behind Eamon's eyes. Not anger, something colder. I don't need protection, he said. I need you to know I still remember everything. Brennan walked out into the dark. Sloane sat with her hands flat on the table. What is he afraid of? Eamon answered without looking away from the door. He's afraid of what your father was going to say to you before he had a heart attack 2 weeks too soon, the week after he wrote that letter. The cold started somewhere in her chest and spread outward until it reached every part of her. The car had not been an accident. And if the car had not been, then her father might not have been either. She asked Eamon to take her to the place where his wife had died. He did not want to. He did it anyway. They drove 2 hours west across the state line. The truck had no working radio. He did not break the silence, neither did she. The site was an empty lot now, chain-link fencing, grass to their knees, 3 unfinished foundations in grey concrete weathered almost black, threaded with rust-red rebar. Yellow safety tape hung in shreds from one corner, sun-bleached to almost nothing. Eamon stopped near the gate and sat in the truck for a long moment before he got out. He walked to a spot near the middle of the lot and stood there without speaking. Sloane followed at a distance. She understood that this place was a grave for him in every way that mattered. He spoke evenly. The Ashcroft Valaris project had been a geothermal energy complex, her father's personal initiative. Valaris Construction was the subcontractor. In the 3rd month of construction, an internal report had been filed flagging critical structural defects in the scaffolding system. The report was suppressed by Brennan Holcroft, acknowledging it would have delayed the project 6 months and dropped Ashcroft Holdings' stock by an estimated 18%. 2 weeks after the suppression, the scaffolding gave way. Cora Whitlock, architect of record, had been on site that morning for a structural review. She was killed where she stood. 2 laborers were injured, one of them permanently. Howard Ashcroft learned the truth a month later. He intended to come forward. Brennan persuaded him not to. The families would be quietly compensated. The matter would not appear in the press. Eamon, as Howard's personal counsel, had handled the settlement negotiations. He had not known until the end of that week that one of the names on the settlement list was his wife. Sloane stood very still. "My father paid for your wife's death," she said. "Your father didn't know Cora was my wife," Eamon said. "I had never mentioned her at work. When he found out, he broke. He never recovered." He paused. "That was why he wrote the letter. That was why he gave it to me. He knew I wouldn't use it for revenge. He asked me only to wait until his daughter was ready to hear it." Sloane sat down into the long grass. She put her hands over her face. For the first time in many years, she cried, not because she was ashamed of it, because she had finally understood what her father had been carrying when he died. Eamon sat down on the ground beside her. He did not touch her. He stayed there as long as she needed. On the drive back, the sun went behind the green mountains. Neither of them spoke. She rested one hand against the door frame. His hand on the gear shift was inches from hers. Neither of them moved. When they reached Linden Hollow, Marjorie had tea waiting and the kitchen lamp lit. Sloane sat down at the table. Eamon sat across from her. She picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Before she opened it, she looked at him. "If my car wasn't an accident," she said, "then maybe my father wasn't either." Eamon did not contradict her. Inside were 2 things: a handwritten letter, 4 pages on cream stationery, and a typed list of 11 names. She read the letter first. Howard apologized in plain language. He described what Brennan had done and why he had agreed to stay silent, to protect the company, and to protect his daughter from a scandal that would follow her name for the rest of her life. Near the end of the 3rd page, he wrote, "I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I believe you will do what I was not brave enough to do." The final paragraph: "If you are reading these lines and I am no longer here, remember that I had decided to come forward the Monday after I wrote this letter. I told Brennan I no longer trusted him." Sloane laid the pages flat on the table. Her hands were not shaking. The shock had passed through her. What was left was something colder and steadier. The list was alphabetical: 3 engineers, 2 site supervisors, 4 mid-level managers, 2 officers from Valaris. Brennan's name was 6th. She looked across the table. "Why didn't you publish this 9 years ago?" "Because Howard asked me to wait for you," he said. The back door opened. Marjorie stepped in carrying a small wooden box, worn smooth at the lid from handling. She set it down between them. "Cora gave me this a week before she died," Marjorie said. Her eyes were wet. "She told me to keep it. She said to only hand it over when Howard Ashcroft's daughter was standing in this kitchen." Eamon went still. Inside the box were 2 things: a small black USB drive and a folded note in a handwriting that made Eamon stop breathing for a moment. "Original structural report. I made a copy before submission." He had not known. In 9 years of carrying all of this, he had not known that Cora had backed it up. "I promised her, Eamon," Marjorie said quietly. "I couldn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Not absolution, understanding. He knew Cora. He knew exactly why she had done it, and why she had trusted Marjorie to hold it, and why she had waited for the right hands. Sloane opened the file on her laptop. The full structural report, original metadata intact, signed by Cora Whitlock as architect of record, with 2 engineer signatures appended in the rejection field, formal refusals to approve, and attached to the document, an internal email thread between Brennan Holcroft and the project director, ending with a single line in Brennan's reply: "Remove this report from the system by close of business." She closed the laptop. She looked at the man across the table. "Thank you," she said, "not for the letter." He understood. For the 9 years he had waited so that she could be the one to open it. He nodded, and for the first time, his hands, resting flat on the wood, finally went still. Upstairs, a door opened. Nora padded down in pajamas asking for a story before bed. Sloane watched Eamon scoop his daughter up and carry her back up the stairs, and something inside her went very quiet, the particular quiet that arrives when something you stopped expecting begins to look, cautiously, like something possible. She flew back to Boston the next morning. She handed her independent counsel the inspection report on the Range Rover and asked them to deliver it directly to the FBI field office. She called an emergency board meeting of Ashcroft Holdings for the following Thursday, gave independent counsel from Chicago the complete file 2 full days in advance, and said nothing to anyone inside the company. When the directors filed in, Brennan was already seated at the far end of the table. Eamon sat against the back wall, credentialed as outside legal counsel under Sloane's formal authorization. He said nothing. He did not need to. She opened with the quarterly financials, clean, routine. Brennan visibly relaxed. Then she turned the screen. Her father's letter, scanned and projected page by page, the list of 11 names, the original structural report from the USB drive, the internal email thread, Brennan's own words on the wall of the 38th floor of the building that bore her family's name. The room went silent in a way that had weight to it. 2 directors rose halfway out of their chairs. "Sit down," she said. "I have not opened the floor." She made 3 motions: the immediate resignation of Brennan Holcroft and the 2 named directors, voluntary disclosure to the SEC and to the Massachusetts Attorney General, the establishment of a public, independently audited restitution fund for every family on the original settlement list. Then she advanced the slide 1 final time. The inspection report, the technical finding, steering and brake systems manually compromised. 4 days ago, she said, someone tried to kill me. The FBI is investigating. I am not accusing anyone in this room. I am informing you. Brennan stood. His face had gone the color of plain paper. You are destroying your father's legacy. She did not raise her voice. I am finishing what my father decided to do before he died. You know that better than anyone in this room. He turned to Eamon. Is this your doing, Whitlock, after 9 years? Eamon looked at him and said nothing. The look was enough. The vote came in 7-2. The two opposed were the names on the list. Brennan walked out of the boardroom. In the elevator lobby, 2 agents from the FBI Boston field office were waiting with a warrant. The charge sheet referenced the Cora Whitlock fatality in 2017, the death of Howard Ashcroft in 2025, and the tampering of a vehicle belonging to Sloane Ashcroft 4 days prior. After the meeting, Sloane and Eamon stood in the hallway by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Boston spread below them in late afternoon light. "Thank you for being there," she said. "You didn't need me there," he said. "I just wanted you to know you weren't alone." She looked at him, not at outside counsel, not at the man with the envelope, at him, and she did not look away. The story moved through the Wall Street Journal, then Bloomberg, then every business section in the country. Brennan Holcroft was indicted on charges of obstruction of justice, document fraud, and attempted murder. The investigation into Howard Ashcroft's death, closed for nearly a year, was formally reopened. It would conclude 4 months later with a finding of slow poisoning, a substituted prescription, and a secondary defendant who took a plea. Sloane worked 17-hour days. She met personally with all 9 families on the original settlement list. She traveled to 4 states in 3 weeks. She sat through whatever each family needed to say and did not interrupt once. She declined every interview request. She gave 1 written statement, 12 sentences, and signed her name to it. Eamon went back to the workshop. He finished a walnut rocking chair he had not been commissioned to build. He sanded it 3 times more than necessary. He oiled it twice. Every morning Nora asked when the Ashcroft lady was coming. He told her when she's done with her work. The child accepted this, but she placed a new drawing on the kitchen table, the moss green Ford this time, so it would be there when Sloane came back. On the 4th weekend, Sloane drove up, not in the Range Rover. She had rented an old grey Subaru in Burlington. Marjorie asked why. "I don't want to drive the one someone adjusted the brakes on." She came to the workshop on Saturday morning. Eamon was rubbing oil into the rocking chair. He looked up when she came in, but he did not look surprised, as if he had known, not that she would come back, but when. "I don't know why I came back," she said. "Maybe because you don't need a reason anymore," he said. She set something on the workbench, Nora's fox drawing in a small black frame. "I kept this on my desk for 3 weeks. It reminded me that some things are given without a reason." Eamon looked at the drawing for a long moment. He did not speak. Then Nora came in from the back, saw Sloane, stopped for exactly 1 second, and ran across the wood shavings and threw her arms around Sloane's legs. No greeting, no hesitation, as if she had simply been waiting for the grown-ups to finish whatever they needed to finish. Sloane, who had never been held by a child like that, rested her hand on the top of Nora's head. The gesture was clumsy. It was real. Late spring, Vermont came back green. The new workshop was framed up, tall, bright, a full wall of windows into the trees. The siding was on. The roof would be finished by midsummer. Brennan Holcroft had been sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Sloane had moved to Linden Hollow 3 months ago. She ran the Cora Whitlock Foundation from a small office above the copper kettle, where Marjorie brought her tea every morning, whether she asked for it or not. Nora had stopped calling her the Ashcroft lady sometime in February and had simply, one morning, started calling her Sloane. Sloane had not corrected her. On a Saturday afternoon in May, the 3 of them painted the new workshop door together, Eamon on the ladder doing the top. Nora crouched at the base with a small brush. Sloane, in jeans and one of Eamon's flannel shirts that did not quite fit, working the middle section. Nora looked up. "Sloane, are you going to stay forever?" Sloane glanced up at the ladder. Eamon was looking down at her. She turned back to Nora. "I'm thinking about it." Eamon came down the ladder slowly and set it against the wall. "Sweetheart," he said, "go find Marjorie for a minute." Nora nodded and ran across the yard toward the porch where Marjorie was already waiting with lemonade, because Marjorie always seemed to know exactly when to be somewhere with something warm or cold in her hands. Eamon turned to Sloane. "You don't have to promise a child something you haven't promised yourself," he said. "I'm promising both of them," she said, "at the same time." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he raised his hand and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear with the back of his knuckle. The first time he had touched her in all the months she had known him. She did not pull back. He did not move closer. It was a moment, no more, but it was long enough for both of them to know it had finally, without ceremony, arrived. Nora came back across the yard and threw one arm around her father and one around Sloane, as if this had always been the arrangement, as if she had simply been waiting for the grown-ups to catch up to what she had known since the afternoon she handed a stranger a drawing of a fox for no reason at all. In the last light of the day, the four of them, Eamon, Sloane, Nora, and Marjorie, standing in the doorway looking up at the sky as if she were talking to someone there, sat on the porch of the new workshop. The moss-green Ford was parked under the maple tree where it always sat now. He had been keeping a promise. She had been carrying a name. And somewhere between a sabotaged brake line and an unopened envelope on a workbench in Vermont, two people who had stopped expecting anything from the world found, quietly and without announcement, that they had been waiting for each other all along. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something in that workshop, at that kitchen table, in that empty lot in the grass, please like this video right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach the people who need these stories. Subscribe to Dadverse Stories if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling us what's something someone once held for you patiently without asking for anything back. We read every single one. We'll see you on the next one.